Hello and welcome into this week's ARCA Menards Series Rewind show right here on Racing News Now. As always, I'm your host, Garth Allen. Thank you once again for joining me today. If this is your first time catching a Racing News Now video, we're currently in our hashtag Race to 1K. Go down below, hit that subscribe button for me. It is free to do. The quicker we get to 1,000 subscribers, the quicker YouTube will let us do mobile live streaming, which will vastly improve both the quality and quantity of coverage we're able to give you when we get back to the track. So let's talk about the season finale of the 2020 ARCA Menards Series. Relatively tame race. The only cautions in this race were for the scheduled breaks at laps 31 and 61. Outside of that, we didn't see any incidents at all in this race until the final lap, which of course did not cause a caution because it happened after the leader had even taken the checkered flag. The only incident that happened at all in this race was Drew Dollar sliding up into Hailie Deegan in turns 3 and 4, coming to the checkered flag. Dollar got a run in the middle groove into turns 3 and 4, apparently couldn't hold it, got loose or something, got up into Deegan, which shoved her into the wall, and then Dollar goes on ahead and smacks the wall pretty hard in front of Deegan's car. Both cars torn up pretty good. I believe Dollar was the only one that actually lost finishing position from that. Deegan still came home with a pretty decent finish. Tame race, very tame race. The only things really happening in this race were the storylines about the race for the win and the race for the championship. Of course, we know coming into this race, Brett Holmes held an 8-point lead over Michael Self. We knew it was going to be tough for Michael Self. Given how many competitive cars were in this race, it was going to be tough. Still possible, but tough. And unfortunately, it just wasn't there for Michael Self. He was kind of off all race, had some fuel pump issues in the first segment of this race. Those seemed to go away on their own. They never really resurfaced in this race, but he just didn't have the speed. And we knew Brett Holmes was going to be fast in this race. This is the race that he won earlier this season. He won at Kansas Speedway. So this is not surprising that he would come into this race and be fast. I'm assuming it was the same car he brought here. I believe that team only has 2 cars, a short track car and a speedway car. So assumably it would be the same car. They hit on the setup when they were here the first time. So not surprising that he would come into this race and be fast. And unfortunately, Michael Self just had speed in the car, but unfortunately was not enough speed to get up to Brett Holmes. I believe 5th was the highest we saw Michael Self in this entire race. With Brett Holmes running extremely fast, starting on the outside pole, he led the first 18 laps of this race. It's not surprising that it just wasn't there for Michael Self, and that seems to be a microcosm of this entire season for Michael Self. The equipment just didn't seem to be there this year, and I don't know why that is. It seems that that team took a major step backward from where they were last year and even in 2018. Mechanical issues, lack of speed. They won races this year. They won a good number of races this year, not as many as they won last year. But they won a lot of races this year, but for some reason, they just seem to be off this year. And unfortunately, that hindered Michael Self in his bid for the championship. If the cars had been there like they were last year, there's no doubt in my mind that Michael Self would have won this championship. But unfortunately, he came into this race behind the 8 ball because of all the issues he's had, and then getting caught up in that wreck at Springfield a couple weeks ago. It just put him behind the 8 ball, and unfortunately, the equipment just didn't seem to be there for him to really compete for this championship. So let's take a look at your lap leaders for today. We mentioned Brett Holmes led the first 18 laps of this race, and then you see Corey Heim there led the other 82 laps in this race. Corey Heim was so dominant in this race. Corey Heim picks up his first career ARCA Menards Series victory in the Speediatrics 150 from the Kansas Speedway. An incredibly dominating win for Corey Heim. Brett Holmes really the only car that could really keep with him, but even at that, especially as they got into the long run, Corey Heim would just pull away from Holmes, and there was really no competition there. It was very clear early on Corey Heim had the fastest car in this race, and unless something unforeseen happened, it was going to be a Corey Heim kind of day. It would not have been necessarily surprising with all the mechanical issues that Venturini cars have had this year if something had happened, but it was good to see that Corey Heim was able to finish this race off, and you see he's in the 10 car. Technically, that car was entered as an Andy Hillenberg fast track racing car, parts just so they could get a better starting position in this race. If you saw Your Next Favorite Driver with Corey this week, he talked about that a little bit, using the 10 car from Andy Hillenburg's stable to get a little bit better of a starting position than they would have if they had used the 55 or something like that. Corey started 9th in this race instead of probably in the rear. I think the 55's only been used once this year, if it's even been used at all, so it would have started him in the rear had they used the 55. So definitely a much better starting position there using the 10, and Corey was able to capitalize on that. Brett Holmes did come home in the 2nd position to clinch the championship. First career championship for Brett Holmes after being in the ARCA Menards series for 5 years now. A great season for Brett, and the biggest thing here is he wasn't even planning on running the full season this year. He was only running maybe half of the season, and then the pandemic hits, and then we have a huge gap in the beginning of the season. They get all that time to work on their cars. They come back from the pandemic, and they're really, really fast. And I said for many weeks after the pandemic, even when Brett was continuing to say, we still don't know if we're running the full season, the way he was running after we came back from the pandemic, you can't not run this whole season. He had the speed that he could win this championship, and as we see here, he did win this championship with a 2nd place finish in this Kansas race. An absolutely incredible season for Brett Holmes. Couldn't happen to a better guy. It couldn't happen to somebody working harder and putting more blood, sweat, tears, and effort into this ARCA Menards series. He has poured his last 5 years into this series, and it finally pays off for him with a championship. I really want to see him be able to continue to progress through the ranks in NASCAR, because I truly believe Brett Holmes has a lot of talent, and this isn't the peak of what his NASCAR career could be. I really want to see him get a solid Truck Series ride next year. I think he would be fantastic. We'll see what happens there, but I really would like to see that for him going forward. Derek Griffith finally gets to cap off a race with a run that really truly shows his talent. I've mentioned this a couple of times. Derek Griffith has had some races where he's been super fast, and then for one reason or another, take Pensacola last week in the ARCA East race. He was super fast in that race, running for the lead, and then gets wrecked. This is a guy that's had a lot of good runs and has had a lot of bad luck and has not had the finishes to showcase the talent that he has. Finally able to put that together really for the first time since New Smyrna at the beginning of the ARCA East season. That was the last time he's really had a run that truly showed start to finish in a race what kind of talent he has. Good to see that he's finally able to get another solid finish with this 3rd place finish in Kansas. Dylan Lupton making a one-off start in the 17 for DGR Crosley. Good run for him in 4th. Michael Self came home in the 5th position, coming just a bit short in that championship. Rest your top 10. Haley Deegan, even after her scuffle with Drew Dollar on the last lap, came home in 6th. Chris Wright in the 12, technically an Andy Hillenburg fast track racing car prepared by Chad Bryant Racing, came home in the 7th position. Drew Dollar, after getting into the wall with his scuffle with Deegan, came home in 8th. Scott Melton in the 69 for Kimmel Racing came home in 9th, and Eric Caudell with a top 10 finish in 10th. Final page 11th through 18th. Mike Basham in the 77 this week, technically entered as a Chad Bryant car, prepared as an Andy Hillenburg fast track car. A lot of drivers swapping around in weird situations and ownership roles this week. Mike Basham's another one, technically a Chad Bryant car, but prepared by Andy Hillenburg. Came home in the 12th position. Good run for him as well. Chandler Smith back here in 13th. He also had fuel pump issues in this race, but unlike Michael Self, his really didn't go away. They'd get him fixed, he'd go back out on track, and then they would come back, and there's 3 or 4 times he was on pit road getting those issues fixed, and they always seemed to be coming back for him. So at least luckily for Michael Self, they never really resurfaced for him, but it really didn't help him in the finish of this race, unfortunately. Ty Gibbs had some sort of mechanical brake caliper, some sort of issue in the right rear after contact with Haley Deegan early in this race. Put him multiple laps down and unfortunately was not able to compete later in the race. After that, he came home in the 14th position, 40 laps off of the pace, and then everybody below him were out early in the race with various mechanical issues. So that's your results from the Speediatrics 150. We're working on an interview with Corey Heim to talk about the race win, and Brett Holmes to talk about this championship. Once those are up, you will see them. Make sure your notifications are turned on by clicking that bell next to the subscribe button. That way you know exactly when those interviews with both Corey and Brett go up to talk about the Kansas race for Corey and the entire season for Brett. So let's go ahead and take a look at your final point standings for the 2020 ARCA Menards Series season. As we talked about, Brett Holmes does come away with his first career championship in the ARCA Menards Series. 1 win on the season, but 19 top 10 finishes for Brett Holmes this season, 14 top 5s total, and 12 points up on Michael Self. Heartbreak again for Michael Self. It was tough seeing him lose this championship last year. As much effort as the guy has put into this effort in the ARCA Menards Series, really tough to see him lose that again. You couldn't find a bigger class act, I don't think, in the ARCA Menards Series garage. If you heard the interview he did with Fox in the post-race, while you could tell that he was disappointed, that was probably the most classy interview I've ever heard from someone just after that big of a defeat. We don't know what the future holds for Michael Self right now. We didn't know what the future held for Michael Self at the end of last year, and then he came back and ran this full season. I will say this, if this is the last time we see Michael Self in a race car, it's been a good ride. It has been so fun to watch. He has been the best on and off the track. It has been so fun to watch him. It's been so fun to talk to him and to see him at the track and to be around him. So again, if this is the last time we see him on the track, I want to wish him the best and well wishes into the future. But hopefully this isn't the last time we see him, because I still really do believe, even if it is in the ARCA Menards Series only, I really do believe he has a bright future. Honestly, if he can put the program together, I could honestly see him being the next coming of Frank Kimmel in the ARCA Menards Series. I see him being that kind of person. It's been tough for him to move past ARCA because of his age at this point. Teams don't want to look at him because he's just a bit past that age that they want for up-and-coming drivers. I really could see him being someone that spends a career in the ARCA Menards Series, and he would be happy with that. He could be super successful with that. So if that is his future, I really would like to see that, because I really think he can have a lot of success in this series. If he continues to compete in this series, we will see a Michael Self championship eventually. It just unfortunately was not in 2020. Haley Deegan finished the season in 3rd to pick up the Bounty Rookie Challenge. So she is the Rookie of the Year this year for the ARCA Menards Series. Drew Dollar came home in the 5th spot. Ty Gibbs, even with not running the whole season, came home 5th in points. Want to give a shout out to Brad Smith there in 6th as well. Great season for him, as well as Mike Basham picking up a top 10 finish in points. So that's your point standings, your final point standings for the 2020 ARCA Menards Series season. Again, congratulations to Brett Holmes on the championship. Well deserved. Put together a fantastic season, and hopefully we see more from him in the future. Hopefully we get to see him move up into the Truck Series next year, or he could be another one that would be a great lifer in the ARCA Menards Series. That would be really fun to see both he and Michael Self in the ARCA Menards Series for years to come. If neither one, for whatever reason, is able to move past the ARCA Menards Series, I think it would be fun to see those two compete in ARCA for years to come. I think those would be great championship battles year in and year out. I would love to see that. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that would enjoy seeing that as well. But I think that's going to do it for this ARCA Rewind show. We've still got 3 ARCA West races coming up the rest of the season. All-American Speedway in Roseville, Kern County Raceway, and the season finale in Phoenix during championship weekend for the top 3 series as well. So definitely we'll have watch parties and rewind shows for those as well. If you're not hanging out in the watch parties already, you need to be. They are a fun time. We just sit there, we watch the race together, we chat about the race and anything else that comes up. So it's a great time. Come hang out with us in those watch parties for these ARCA West races that remain this season. And like I said, we've got Corey Heim, Brett Holmes interviews coming up later this week once we can get those scheduled, so keep an eye out for those. Make sure your notifications are on so you know when those go up. And if you haven't seen it already, we premiered Season 2 of Your Next Favorite Driver on Thursday, and our first guest on there goes out and wins. I'm not saying I'm a good luck charm, but that's the way it's looking right now. So if you haven't seen that yet, go check out that chat with Corey Heim on Your Next Favorite Driver. It was a great time chatting with him and getting to know him on a little bit more of a personal level rather than just what we see out on the track. So go check that out if you haven't already. I'll link that down below in the description for you. But I think that's going to do it for this. So thank you as always to our Patreon supporter, Regional Manager William Holmes. Thank you as always for your support. It's greatly appreciated. If you would like to be a patron of RNN, the link is down below in the description, patreon.com/racingnewsnow. Not required by any means, but it's greatly appreciated when you want to support RNN in that way. But I think that's going to do it for this ARCA Rewind show. So at that, I'm Garth Allen for Racing News Now.